All right, so thank you all for coming out for the second session. I'm super excited that we have this many people in the room the second time around. We're going to see like this vanishing curve, and it looks like about the same number of people, so that's fantastic. So for those of you that didn't make the first session, I see a few of you in the room. There's only a couple of homework assignments, right? So reading the pages, and then coming in today with a goal on your gross commission income for 2019. So if you haven't done that, jot it down on a piece of paper real quick. How many of you that were here Tuesday did that? Yeah? Fair number? Okay. And did you think about your big why at all? Did you think about what's driving you and what's pushing you to get to this number? Spend some time on that? I can't fix that one for you. So spend some more time. It took me years. I mean, I'd say it probably took me 10 years so far to get to where I am now, and I'm still working on it. So just stay focused on it. Keep working through it. If you have any questions on the big why and how it attaches to this ultimate goal, we'll go through that now. But make sure you write down your gross commission income number. So as we go through each of these models, there's 4 models that we'll be really attending to. Right up here, you've got the 4 models worksheet. There's today we'll be going through the economic model. Next will be lead generation. Some of that we might spill into today at the end, just due to content. And then the budget model, which is the one that I'm most focused on today in my business. It's kind of the newest thing that I've really focused on, especially with the shifting market. So I'll be putting a lot of thoughts to paper and sharing on the budget model next week. And the 4th is the organizational model. So key hires, how do you use leverage to get you to that next step? Before we really get into the economic model today, I wanted to introduce to you Mr. David Aguirre with his mouth full. So David and I go way back. I actually give him all of my paint. So if you have an interior, exterior, getting something ready for sale, or even a buyer getting into their home, David's been fantastic. I trust him with my kids, with my dogs. His crews are fantastic. Family-run business. And did you want to say anything, David?
Well, I just want to thank you for inviting me, Brad. I have worked with Brad on quite a few projects. Excuse me, I just took a little bite of a sandwich. I've been doing this for almost 30 years. My 2 sons work with me, which is so much fun, and they help me run a crew. It's been a great, source of pride for me to have them working with me. And just want you to know that, just like when Brad refers me to one of his clients, we'll take really good care of him. I know how much he puts his reputation on the line when he refers somebody to us. So if you all would be so kind to refer me to somebody, we'll take really, really good care of them. I know that it's always a little nerve-wracking when you're putting your reputation on the line to refer somebody, so we will take good care of them. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you. David's paint work is as good as the lunch he brought today.
Wow.
Time to measure. Did you enjoy lunch?
Lunch was great.
So David's been a great referral partner for us, and actually is going to stay, I believe, through the course today and talk a little bit about the economic model. So what I wanted to do is to start simple, right? Let's go to the lowest common denominator here and talk about the basics of what the economic model are. Okay, we're all business owners, right? Right?
Yes.
Not salespeople, right?
Right.
So in business ownership, what are we looking at? What are the important factors to us in business ownership when it comes to the bottom line?
Working backwards or net.
Net income, right? I like working backwards. We'll be doing a lot of that today. Okay, so how much money do you have at the end of the day? Is that led by?
Your P&L?
Revenue. P&L is a detailed description of what that looks like.
Gross commission income.
GCI, right? Gross commission income, or where does my money come from? And I write this out because I think most agents don't know. Like physically, where does the money come from? What action what resource, what category does the money actually come from? Because GCI is the number that's the result, but we'll be doing an exercise today to really break down, where's it coming from? Where are you spending your time or money to get that back in return? Okay? What's number 2?
Expenses. Where does our money go?
Expenses. And again, or where does it go? How many people know what a P&L is? How many people actually use one? Not that many. Okay. If you're doing it, you're ahead of the game. So a P&L is a profit and loss statement based on how you spend your money, where it comes from, and what comes out on the bottom line. We're not going to go deep into P&Ls today, but we're going to do some exercises that will help get you to that place. Help you categorize expenses, help you categorize where the actual business is coming from, so that you have an understanding as to what makes sense. And you can play red light, green light a little bit with what you're spending and where your time is being spent as well. One thing that we've been really easy, we're going to be talking about budget model in 2 sessions from now. But budget's been such a focus for us to cut expenses and to make sure we're not spending things on random computer programs that are recurring, or random, like Dave was telling me, he sends out cookies to lots and lots of people every year. And it's something that he's looked at and tried to itemize, who am I really sending these to and what impact are they having for me? So we'll go through some exercises on that as well. But basically your GCI less your expenses equals your net income. Right? Okay, so we set net income or gross income goals, right? We set goals that surround the GCI. I'm not going to ask you to share your goals, so you can take a deep sigh. But there's some questions that people asked the last time, like, how do I set my GCI goal? I'm brand new, right? We talked about what is the measure of success. I heard from over here that, Dan, you set some goals and your team challenged you to raise those goals, right? It might be too small, or maybe they're unattainable and there's not really a program as to how to get to them. When you're setting your goals, there's no goal, in my opinion, that's too big if you can support it. So if you can put the work behind it, or the energy, time, money, the goal can be as big as you want it to be. Now, tying it down to what the big why is to propel you in that direction is important. If you're a brand new agent, you're going to make $2 million this year, I probably want to see a pretty darn good business plan and support for it. An experienced agent that's incrementally only going up, 5% over the previous year might challenge you on how you can expand that horizon. So based on those goals, what I want to do with you today is work backwards into what the goals and the end results and that number that you want to achieve translates into what to focus on. So you set a big goal, you want to make $1 million this year. What are the activities, what are the numbers associated with that big goal? Has anyone done this exercise? Does anyone know how many appointments they need to go on in order to net the amount of money that they want to? You have? Okay. Not an overwhelming response from the room, so hopefully bear with me here. We'll go through the details. I tell my team all the time, I'm not a details guy. If I miss something, shout it out, help me. I'm a big picture and I work my way down to the details. The team works from the details typically back up to the big picture. So help me through this a little bit if you feel like I've gone astray on you. I'm going to pass out these. And right now we're going to focus on the top page. All right, so first off, before you get through the whole package there, I'm going to share with you what the MREA shows as being all right, so what the MREA shows as being the model to net $1 million in income. Now, who's netted $1 million in income so far? No hands, okay. But it's a big model, right? We're focused on a big model. So based on a pool, and we talked about this last time, a pool of the number of agents they they interview across a cross-section of the country, they've come to these numbers. And so to net $1 million, we work backwards from the bottom. Okay? So to net the million, you have $700,000 in operating expenses, which makes a total gross income of $1.7 million. You looked at cost of sales on both sides that work their way up. And then it actually builds into conversion rate. So it goes into the average commission from the GCI that you want to make, the $40 million a year or $3.33 million a month, to the average sales price, to the buyer sold, conversion rate, and then ultimately at the very top of this model, after your conversion rates, it's 306 buyer appointments a year to net the amount of money on the buyer side that they're going for. Well, how many agents in San Diego do 306 a year? It's a lot, right? Not really relevant to our price point in San Diego, but the model still holds true, okay? So the first page that I gave you is the same framework to work backwards to get to the number of buyer or seller appointments that you'll need to do in order to get to your goal, okay? So your GCI goal, if you would, put it in. We're going to work from GCI. I'm not going to go into net and expenses because we have such a cross-section of agents in the room. In the GCI line, which is total gross revenue, doesn't say GCI, but the third line up on that first page, put in the goal. Are you following me?
Where is it?
Yes.
Just to backtrack, I know you're not going into it right now, but if we're working this out at home ourselves, we want to start with the net income. So let's just say, and then we're trying to figure out how do we calculate what expenses are going to be, percentage?
So the reason why I'm not taking that piece today is because it varies by, typically you work off of what happened in this year or last year, right?
And if you're new, is there like a percentage you kind of estimate?
So the basics in this is you want to focus on lead generation activities that don't cost you money. So as a brand new agent, there are some models that when we get into the budget model, it will be very detailed. I can actually say, I think it's 193 is the page. Just double check. If I remember the page, that's pretty good. Nope,
193.
it's not the page.
Yeah, it does say budget model on 193. You may have a different this year's training.
No, almost though. Find it for you, hold on. We're close, we're close. So there's a page in here that reflects percentages based on the scale that you're at. So a brand new agent, what they can expect if they're going to do $100,000 in GCI versus someone who wants to do net $1 million. And kind of what those, because they change. It's not a percentage for a brand new agent that's the same as somebody who wants to do 250 or 500. Right, because the expenses and the overhead change. I'll get the page for you by the end so you can reference it back. So based on that, yes, you definitely want to factor in expenses, but ultimately I'm looking for the gross number, right? We want big goals, looking at the gross numbers. And when we get into the budgeting and the modeling for the budget model, we will be able to get into what expenses you'll have to get to that number, okay? So based on this, based on our discussion on Tuesday, there's a wide variety of who's working with buyers or sellers, right? So let's allocate right now the two directions. So if you're a brand new agent, how much of that income do you believe might come from buyers versus sellers? 80%? 75%? There's no wrong answer here, but if that's where you believe the majority of your income is going to come this year, weight it on the buyer side. Okay, so use a number, 75, 80%, whatever that number is. What's a healthy number in real estate sales as you grow to scale? Do you want to be 50-50? Do you want to be 65-35? Do you want to be all listings? Where do you want to go with this? Who knows what the book says or what Gary Keller talks about?
He says 50-50 because every listing should generate at least a buyer, so that brings you pretty close to 50-50.
So actually, I challenge that just a little bit.
60-40 maybe.
So every listing brings a buyer and a seller.
Oh, okay, so then it's, okay.
So it's a little bit more than
35.
50-50. My numbers this year are 65-35.
Yeah.
My preference is to work with 65% listings and 35% buyers. Is every year that accurate? I've had buyers years where it was 70% buyers and 30% listings while still doing a good amount of volume. So it's just a matter of looking at, okay, so if I want to model for 2019, how much of that do I want to be on the listing side? Okay. Use my numbers, use 50-50. I don't think there's really a wrong answer here. It all depends on what your focus is and what you want to accomplish. Okay, so we work our way up. So let's say, in my example, I want to gross $1 million, right? And I want it to be 65-35. So in this line over here, gross revenue from sellers, I'm going to put 650,000, right? On this line over here, gross revenue from buyers, it's going to be 350. Right? Everybody follow me so far? Okay, everybody doing the exercise? Because it's going to get really detailed here in a second. So based on that, on your buyer side, what's the average commission rate in San Diego from your buyers? No, the rate.
I used 2.45. I mean, there were this last year, there were a good number of 2.0.
2%.
Yeah.
There's some agents out there offering 2.4%.
Yeah.
Right? What's an average? 2.5 is probably a pretty good figure. I'm negotiating one with 3% on a property over $1 million. So there's a variance there. So 2.5%. So now with your calculator, everybody's got a phone. You divide your gross revenue. So it says multiply. Follow along. Divide your gross revenue by 2.5%. What number should that bring out?
Transaction.
Should be volume. Okay, so in my example, I did $350,000 in gross revenue from the buyers and divided by 2.5%. That number should show up somewhere around $14 million. So $14 million in sales should come from my buy side transactions. If your number is smaller than that, it should be in the millions most likely, right? How many sales you do on the buy side. So you should have something with millions in it. Everybody with me? Are you doing okay with the calculator? For real estate, I know you don't have to be perfect at math. And I promised everyone, Brian Hoffman's not here to correct me on my math in public. I promised I wouldn't do my actual math in front of anyone. So, so for me, on buyer side volume, it got me to $14 million. Now, who knows what their average sales price was in 2018? You do. How many? Yeah, good numbers. You run the numbers, you looked at your reports, you know what your average sales price is. Use that number. Whether it's listing sales, just use that number right in here. If you don't know what it is, I recommend that you use maybe the average sales price in San Diego, or maybe your target market, right? If you're targeting a market that's 1.2 million or $1 million, use that as your average sales price. If you want to use the average because you just don't know where the next piece of business is going to come from, then use the average sales price. So what's the average sales price in San Diego this year?
The average is median.
Well, throw me a number. Average or median?
5.5, 583.
5.5.
Probably somewhere between 550 and 650. Somewhere in there, depending on what report you're reading. Okay? So now divide the average sales price, buyer sold volume by the average sales price. In my example, I use 750, that's my average sales price. $14 million divided by 750 got me to 18.67. I recognize, Debbie, that our numbers are slightly different than our conversation this morning. I'll tell you why afterwards. Okay. So 18.67. So let's talk conversion rates for a minute. So now we're going to get into kind of the ambiguity, if you will, especially if you're newer in the business. and you're not super focused on your numbers, or even if you're an experienced agent in the business and not focused on your numbers. Of every buyer, so let me start from the front. How many people use buyer broker agreements consistently? Yeah? And how many people don't? You know, it's not right or wrong. I mean, they're on both sides, right? So this is going to be something that we have to address, right? If you don't sign buyer broker agreements, how do you qualify what a buyer is?
Handshake.
Handshake. That works for me. You know what? It's not my method,
It's the truth.
but if that's the methodology, that becomes a buyer for you. Now, I personally recommend that you do buyer broker agreements. That's my own personal feeling on it, but it's your choice. So if it's a handshake that qualifies them as a buyer, that's what we're going to try to get to. So if you have buyer listings taken or buyer's handshakes taken, how many of those handshakes actually turn into sales? Anybody track their numbers?
Yeah.
75%? Okay. Not saying it's right or wrong. Anybody else? What do you think is going to happen in 2019 of those? How many meetings do you have with buyers that turn into actual sales?
It's gonna go up, we're gonna need more.
Well, you're going to need more appointments. The actual ones that perform are probably going to go down.
Down, yes.
Okay, so what I recommend here is to use a conservative approach. So the number of people that I put into a buyer broker agreement, the number that actually buys, when it was a good market, I'd probably say 75%. It was really strong. 75% of the people that signed a contract with me were going to buy something in that year. Okay. Today, I'm going to look at those numbers completely differently. Okay, and I'm going to look at a much lower rate of return on the number of people that I sign contracts with, because I think it's going to take far more of them on the buy side to get to the actual close numbers that I want. Okay, so what do we use this morning, Debbie?
Sorry. It wasn't listening.
Our team's using 50%. So 50% of the people that I shake their hand, and it's not because of me, it's not because of Debbie or the team, it's because of the market. 50% of those people, 25 might fall off and say, hey, I don't think it's the right time to buy. And you're going to try and reel them back in, you go back and forth, and ultimately they might not buy that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just as a side note, you, if I understood you right, you have everybody sign a buyer broker agreement?
Correct.
What if they don't want to sign a buyer broker agreement? Do you still work with them?
If the qualifications are correct.
What does that mean?
So if I've qualified them to a deep enough level
Yeah.
that I believe they're still a buyer and they haven't fit the mold of what we would constitute a buyer broker agreement, there are times that I will continue to work with them. Now, what I'll tell you is most of the time when we get to that point and they won't sign a buyer broker agreement, something always goes wrong. And it's not normally on our end. There's normally something that shows up. I can give you lots of examples, runaway buyers. I can give you examples of all sorts of things that when they don't follow our guidelines as to how we work, it normally goes sideways somehow. But yes, there are definitely people that we've closed that we don't have under buyer broker. So there's a balance between that. But it's a high percentage. We're probably about 80% of the people we work with have buyer broker.
So something that I'm learning in Gold, and I just want to comment, because I've been doing a lot of this in Gold and ALC and everything. And so, you know, it used to be for us, because we'd get come list me's and whatever, it was a very, very high. And now, in using the models here and expanding reach, the things that aren't as come list me, is being really conservative here, because you're only going to set goals that are more realistic for your success in getting that number.
Right.
So, you know, I say err on the side of like you're doing lower, because you're dealing more with masses, more with a shifting market, and just.
So if our team meeting this morning, we talked about if I did these exact same numbers and conversion rates on my sphere of influence leads for listing and buyer appointments, numbers are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that in order for us to hit our goals, we know we have to scale and go on more of the, like I went on an appointment in Carmel Valley the other day against 5 other agents. Carmel Valley against Richard Stone, Bobby Martins, every name that shows up in Carmel Valley, I went up against it. And I knew, I mean, I'm going to go in, I'm going to take this listing if I want it. And I even did all the affirmations going in, and I knew I had this massive uphill battle. that there was a shot that I might get it if I really connected with the seller. But when they brought out the resume that I sold 75 homes, 75 of your neighbors' homes, I'm like, oh boy, that's gonna be a tough one. And I didn't get it, right? It was a lower percentage that I was actually going to get. And so it just you have to be more realistic, like you said, in terms of what your conversion numbers are today. And you have to keep watching these metrics too, because the style of your business and the type of business that you go after, these numbers will be different. Someone who only cold calls, totally different numbers, right? So adjust accordingly. So of that, if you have the number of your buyers sold that you need to hit your goal, you divide it by 50%, it doubles the number of actual buyer listings taken or buyer handshakes that you need in order to get to that number. Okay, ready to follow? Who's jumped way ahead and already has their top number? Quite a few again, I figure. I do the same thing. Buyer listing appointment. So now what's the conversion rate of the number of appointments that you go on to the handshake deal or the contract, depending on what your methodology is? How good are you in the appointment? Do you know?
The buyer.
Mm-hmm. We didn't start tracking this until just recently.
No, and you don't, and I encourage people to, interview or, whatever, but you don't usually hear buyer listing appointments, but that's exactly what you're saying, so,
3 years now that we've been tracking it this way,
yeah.
give or take.
So I do open houses, so I just started really asking for the appointment at the open house. And I've noticed that if I ask for the appointment, we go on the appointment, there's a huge disconnect. If I didn't pre-qualify them before our appointment, if I didn't have a 1-hour conversation, they don't trust me yet. But if I pre-qualify them for an hour, if I even talk to them at the open house for a half hour, then they're gonna sign. But it's that disconnect of building the trust in between.
So let me challenge one piece of that. Don't allocate an hour time to pre-qualify the appointment. Allocate your hour time in the appointment when you have them in the office and ask very directed, comfortable questions that show you're the expert before you bring them into the office. Because if you define, I meet somebody at an open house, I define they're a real buyer at the open house, I schedule an appointment with them, then I call and say, I just wanted to follow up with you, confirm our appointment, and I have a couple questions for you before we actually sit down. It's a totally different mindset. And your time value will go through the roof, and they're more likely to sign when they show up.
And I know the pressure. Yeah.
And you know where the pain is or what they're concerned about, and you might get on the phone with them and decide, this isn't a real buyer, and move on. We had a buyer walk into an open house the other day, and his first question was, how much are you going to discount your commission so I can buy this house? And I'm like, there's the door. This is a non-starter, right? There's nothing to talk about. But sometimes that takes a little bit more time to come out, right? So in this, if we sit down on an appointment with buyers, typically I'm going to be somewhere, it's been traditionally somewhere in the 80 to 85% range. I'm going to come off that number a little bit and call it 75%. Okay, I'm pretty skilled at it and getting the buyer broker by the end of the appointment, entering that person in. Now into a contract. Now if you're doing a handshake, you've got to be the metric. What is the metric that you walked away from that appointment with a good warm handshake and you know they're going to work with you as long as you live up to your end of the bargain? Where is that threshold? Okay. So what kind of numbers do we get at the top? You can share these. Anyone?
36 sellers, 23 buyers.
23 buyers. 23 buyers. What kind of metrics for conversion did you use, Kevin?
75% on listing appointment, 50% on conversion.
Okay.
And we do track it, so we're pretty consistent on that.
So 23 buyer appointments in order to yield you how many buyer sales?
8.57.
Okay, so 9. I'd always round up the number. So 9 buyer sales is a result of 23 appointments.
Yeah.
Who else wants to share? David?
And 38 buyer appointments for 16 buyer sales. And then 26 listing appointments for 19 seller sales.
So your ratios on buyers are 75%, 75%?
Buyers, it's 85% and then 50%.
85 and 50, so a blend. So
Yeah,
if you get in front of them, you're probably gonna sign a contract.
right, then there's a 50-50,
There's 50-50 whether or not they show up and actually buy a house.
that's right.
And 23 listing appointments, 16 buyer appointments.
Ratio similar to what we talked about?
So it's interesting, I just, you know, from the appointment to the listing taken to the conversion sold, so it's like 23 appointments to get only 12 closings from the list side. And then 16 buyers to get only 5. So we only got 17 sales there, so it looks so little, you know, and yet that's exactly where I want to be.
They're your numbers.
You know, if those conversion rates are better, great bonus,
And what
awesome.
happens if they're worse?
I'll have to go back and
You have
adjust
to
and
get
see
more
what, I gotta go see
transactions.
what's happening.
Adjust the
More
numbers.
transactions.
Well, it's either
More
more
appointments.
appointments, better conversion, right?
Correct,
One of the two.
something.
Anybody else?
You got 26 buyer appointments with a 50-50 on conversion, and a 75 for buyers and 25 for listings.
Okay.
So 26 appointments for buyers and 8.6, so 9 for listings.
You know what, that's reasonable. That's a really reasonable number. Does the number of appointments you need to go on scare you?
Not actually, when I look at it right now, no.
So let's go to the next step. Let's chunk it down to what it means on a regular basis. So does anybody know how many weeks of the year they'll work this year?
No,
48? Reasonable? There's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
I talked to an agent in Specula last month, and he works 52 weeks of the year. It's not wrong. It's not a very happy life. It's not wrong. So define right now. Look at what are you going to take off? Are you going to go to Paris this year? Are you going to have a weekend vacation somewhere? What is it going to be in 2019 that you'll take off for leisure? Are there any major events in your family's life? I have a wedding and a 60th birthday. I know I'm going to have to spend at least a week, probably 2 weeks somewhere celebrating a family's birthday and a wedding.
You didn't phrase that very nice.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. It's just cutting into my own vacation time. So those of you that were here last week, I build everything off a 38-week year. So when I run my numbers, it's based on 38 weeks. So it's about 10 weeks for vacation. It's 2 weeks for major events, Keller Williams, so mega camp, family reunion, and then a flex 2 weeks. So long weekend, go to Lake Havasu, spending a couple extra days here and there. It scared me when I first did it, and wow, I looked back and said I would never do it any other way. So I now have a calendar that states the major vacations that I'm going to take off with the weeks already blocked, that I cannot work or schedule appointments those weeks. What do you think happens when I go on vacation? Donna knows what happens when I go on vacation. I get the busiest I've ever been, and oh my gosh, I just put 4 escrows in the day before I
All
left.
you gotta do is plan to go.
for sure. Best thing to do for business is plan away.
Plan to go away. Yeah. And what is the fundamental of that? Why does that happen?
You get efficient.
What's the Thursday before you leave on a Friday to go out of town?
Pulling an all-nighter.
Well, some people do that.
Loose ends.
You're
Plan ahead.
incredibly
Plan
efficient.
ahead.
Right.
You make every call that you've been putting off forever. You tie up every loose end you possibly can, and you push through it. Now, when you're gone for a week, does the world stop?
No.
No. If you put in the right leverage and pieces, somebody to help cover your business, or you're willing to work a little bit. Everyone here knows 10 weeks out of the year, trust me, I pick up the phone, I call people back, I'm on the computer in the morning. It's not 100% turn everything off and unplug. And I respect people who can do that. But there is a component to it that is really, really sharp. I absolutely love the fact that I plan, I'm going to be in London with my kids in March, and I'm going to have these vacations and these opportunities, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't plan it well in advance, right? So it doesn't have to be 10 or 12 weeks for you, but plan the number of weeks that you intend to take off and you'll be out of the office. And instead of dividing by 52, divide by the number of weeks that remains. Okay, so that top number for buyers and for sellers. How many buyer appointments do you need to go on? Divide that by the number of weeks that you'll work this year. The same thing for sellers. Did anybody not get through the seller side? I didn't go through it specifically, and we haven't talked about conversion rates there yet, but we'll talk about that here in a second.
What happens if you get a decimal that's really close to the middle? If you-
Round up.
So 58 is 1, 25.
Say, right, well, if it's
Point
fine.
five.
Top number, told you.
So now I'm dividing that appointment by how many weeks I work, and tell me how many appointments per week.
So what we're trying to break this down to is just the weekly number of appointments on the buyer side that you need to go down. Go on. So it's
A round number,
one
1 per week.
a week. Who
Well,
else has a different number? Anyone? Everybody one a week? And more than one. So I'm typically 1.5 to 2 on how many buyer appointments I need to go on every single week in order to achieve the goal based on our ratios. Okay. Now, what does it look like a month? So let's look at that number 2, right? And I look at this across 12 months, not across the number of weeks you work. So if you had 50 per se, divided by 52, divided by 12, how many would that be?
Four something,
50 divided by 4.
four something, right? 4.5, I think.
So it's right around 5. So 5 buyer appointments every single month in order to get to the bottom line. Is that doable?
But you know, it doesn't quite come that way.
Well, it's going to come in spurts.
It's
not going to
spurts,
happen.
yeah. So we
Like
kind of have to catch up or not and adjust.
And what control and direction can you make on a regular basis? Because now when we go, this is how many appointments we need. What can we do with intention in order to create that as an opportunity? Because if you rounded up from 0.58 and said, I'm going to do 1 a week, and you hit your goal every week, what happens?
You should turn up your goal.
Well, the goal just went up.
Yeah.
And your conversion and the bottom line is going to go up too because you rounded up. Right? So if you went on 1 buyer appointment a week, pretty solid. Same thing on the seller side. For those of you that went through sellers already, what kind of numbers did you use for the conversion of going on the appointment to actually taking the listing?
65, I know.
I know.
65, 75%? What do you think? What's your business look like? Do most of us in this room mostly have Sphere as their business? Is there anybody that's cold calling at a high level?
No.
Prospecting, walking door to door? Okay. Is the ratio going to be higher or lower in that space?
Higher.
Higher percentage?
For Sphere. Oh.
Higher percentage in Sphere
Yeah. Lower in the
over
other.
your cold call conversion. Now I'll caution you a little bit, right? My Sphere, I'd say typically if I'm going on an appointment in my Sphere, it's going to be somewhere between 85 and 90%. Most of the time I'm going to get the listing. As the market changes and shifts, you're going to get more recommendations that are competitive. Okay, it's going to be a change in who you're going up against and how many, and that might actually reduce as well. We've blended our rate and used some of the outbound prospecting that we're doing and the things that we're doing to bring that rate down. We're actually using a 75%.
I was also going to say that when I take listings, I can control what rate I take it at.
Mhm.
And so
Absolutely.
my average commission rate is higher on a sale with a listing than it is on a buyer.
And we actually, I'll talk about that with ours. We absolutely are higher on the listing than we are on the buyers. We average somewhere between 3.1 and 3.2% on the list side,
Listing percentage for your son?
on average. So we take some at 2.5, but we also take some that are higher.
So you're taking, because you,
3.5,
you just give yourself more and give less out to the buyer's side.
Sometimes it's equal, it just depends on the situation. That's between me and the seller. We've had some people very mad at us for doing that.
You mean, well, you don't have to have escrow send the commission payments to you.
Well, we certainly wouldn't do that, but also just the philosophy behind it. It's an agreement between me and the seller. It has nothing to do with the buyer's agent. And we never offer less than what we believe the industry standard is. So as long as that is consistent, there is no conflict. Okay, so that is another factor to toggle here in your commission rate. So if you're getting a higher commission rate overall, certainly you can use that in terms of in reducing the number of appointments that you need to go on and listings you need to take. So conversion rate, we use 75% at the top, and then the conversion rate from listings taken to sellers sold. What has that been historically?
Been real high.
Some people might be
The
100%.
last couple of years, it's been high.
Been
Yeah,
really
it's like
high.
I don't think it's
Really
been high.
high.
But, yeah.
Are we seeing more expireds?
Yes,
Are we experiencing them ourselves in some cases?
no, but we will.
What's your average price point? I'm expiring list properties. I've got a couple that are super expensive. We're relisting, but I'm getting expireds and I'm counting those. I didn't sell it within the time frame allowed. Okay. So in that conversion rate, that should change. It may have been 100%. I would never use 100 for that sake, but it might be the book says 80%. Okay, so the book says 80. I'd even venture to go a little lower than that. We use 75. Okay, and then the commission rate also, as we talked about, obviously you set the commission rate with the seller, and if it's on your side of the transaction, your rate might be a little bit higher. If you're a brand new agent just trying to look at numbers, I encourage you to use 3% just for the mere mindset piece that don't sell yourself short at 2.5%. You don't have to. Okay. Questions on the seller side? Any comments from newer agents looking at this from their perspective, or some of your experienced agents in the room? Yeah.
Well, I'm commercial and a newer agent, so it's especially tricky for me. I mean, I don't have much to say other than I'm kind of racking my brain to figure out the model when it's a little bit more. There's varying commission rates.
Sure.
Very much varying average sales price.
Sure.
We're talking about different styles of commercial. So, I mean, I'm still able to kind of get a basic idea of what the goal goes gross commission is. It's just a matter of working backwards as a few more steps.
Okay. So in this model, I challenge you to say that there's not really anything different. And a proven model over 10 years, when you're 10 years in the business and you look back, it's going to make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I think your average sales price and your average commission rate are going to show up because it was trackable during that time.
Yeah, I'll just need some data.
You might use some scratch data to try and help you along with the model to get started. And commercial, I wouldn't treat it any different. Now you might have a leasing model versus a sales model, and that would be different. But it might be very similar to using these two sides, or maybe you add a third component to it if leasing is a part of your gig.
Yeah.
Well, and you can get very detailed in property type, but keep it simple to start, especially if you're brand new in the business. Keep it really simple and then grow the model and create complexity if you need it. Questions? How many agents in the office are already doing this? Okay. Cool. Who has it chunked down in a visual representation so they can look at it all the time? Kevin does. Who has their numbers posted? Yeah, good. Are you using the 4 conversations? Here's what I'm going to share with you. This CGI stuff, I know a lot of people have stepped into the room and like written it off and said it's terrible and oh my gosh, it's kind of a rah-rah session from Keller Williams. Every time I step away from their darn models, I get bit. And so I've just said I'm going all in with all of these models and I'm just going to focus on what the model and outline that Keller Williams is providing to work in my business. okay? So I was the guy last year and the year before fighting CGI and saying, I'm not going and putting that in the calculators and doing all that. Effectively, the CGI calculator is exactly this, prompted for you. So if you want to do the same exercise and have it in the KW command and all the different tech pieces, you can do that just by talking to Kelly and saying, find my CGI calculator, right?
Don't do that right now, everybody.
You could.
We'll overload it.
But that's one of the things that you can do. And the models themselves of the 4 conversations is something that's in your package, it's on the back of this page, that is posted now up in my office for both sides, okay? So what I encourage you to do is look at it at a weekly, monthly, and annual level at a very minimum, okay? So the numbers that we just produced, before you write anything into the boxes, the way that I found this tool to be the most effective is to put a diagonal slash through every box. And Paul might shoot me because I'm not right on the model. However, I want to have, and for some of you new agents too, this will be very effective. I want to have an outlook on what the number of listing appointments that I want to go on and buyer appointments that I want to go on. Keller Williams has given a very forward, been very direct that it's all about listings. Listings, my coach won't even talk to me about buyers. I mean, he literally won't talk to me about buyers. And it frustrates me because it's a portion of my business and I want to know my conversion rates and I want to know how it's going. But they've had this major focus on listings. So when I've taken a diagonal, and the way that mine looks, I actually just write a diagonal through each of these boxes, top and bottom, right? And it's posted on the wall in my office. So in the top, I do listings.
Oh, and the bottom is buyers.
And then in the bottom of that triangle, I do buyers. So based on my conversion numbers and the exercise we just did, based on a monthly allocation, I put the number of listing appointments that I need to go on, and I put the number of buyer appointments that I need to go on in that month in order to hit my goals. And that translates into buyer listings taken, and seller listings taken, and then closings, and then profit. Follow? Would this be a helpful representation if you saw it every day?
Yes.
Okay. But if you saw it every week, what your weekly number was?
You'd be on track.
You're on track. We can talk about that one. All I have to do is go on one buyer appointment this week. That simple. And it really is, if you get into it, it's that simple. If you focus on that one appointment and finding it. Now the methodology in finding that buyer appointment is all about next course, right? All the different methodologies that you can do in the lead generation model. But if I just focus on one listing appointment and one buyer appointment, or 2 listings appointment and 1 buyer appointment, then you can physically track your conversion for this year. If you're not already tracking that conversion, this will show up 12 months from now, and you can look back. I'm doing it right now. Look back at what my actual conversion rates were in 2018 and see where my gaps are. What I set up as my goal for conversion versus what actually happened. Now, what can be prescribed if I missed on my conversion rate from the number of listing appointments that I went on to the number of listings that I took? What would a coach tell me?
Scripts and dialogues.
Brush up on scripts and
Yeah,
dialogues.
polish it up.
I know I'm short. Maybe it's my pre-listing package. Maybe it's something in my impression when I walk into a meeting that's not as good, right? Then what about going over the wall of value? Listings taken versus actual closings.
Pricing.
Could be pricing.
Price
Could be
reduction.
price reduction. Could be scripting in that.
Staging.
Could be staging. Could be your whole value proposition of what you provide and what's actually, forcing the property to sell or causing it to sell. And the closings and profit. Now, when I look at profit, I'm just looking at GCI. I'm not trying to extrapolate numbers on my net income on the profit. But based on that, do you know your number of monthly income that is necessary in order to hit your goal? So take that original number that you wrote down at the bottom and divide it by 12. As Megan tells me, mine is lucky. Oh, I hope that's true.
Lucky.
I guess so.
Well, it's your angel number.
It's my angel number. I haven't tracked my angel number, but It's a very unique number, and it shows up to me. I know exactly what it is off the top of my head. You want to know? 83, 333, 33. That's the number. And if you're shooting for $1 million, that's what the number is. So, but it's just a visual representation and a reminder to me. Now, I've done it, this exact same spreadsheet, for the week, the month, the quarter, and the year. All in front of me at all times. And then I'm going to be posting each month, each week, each month, each quarter, the next quarter over the top of it so I can see my actuals at any time. And I actually have like a flip book of what happened in the preceding week or the preceding month.
So when I look at this and we go over it, I always feel like I'm looking at that wall of value and it's supposed to trigger something in my head to like prompt me to think of something. And I'm actually not really clear what it is wanting me to do with that to trigger. Do you know what I mean?
So
Does it?
the wall of value is what helps you with conversion
Okay.
from the listing or the buyer listing taken to the actual closing. So what are you providing as value? What are you taking over that wall? They call it a wall for that reason, because you have to take them across that threshold. So what are you offering as value to get them from point B to point C?
Oh, okay. Get it.
Got it? It's not a stick that's going to hit you in the head. That looks like it.
Because I almost feel like there's another wall from the appointment to the listing being taken.
Sure.
The value is, I think, a lot of the appointment too. And
Well, the
so
value
that's why
that
I feel like it's.
the value that you're setting up in your appointment is still the wall of value. It's just showing up earlier in the process.
Okay.
So it's still all the value. It's just what takes you from the starting line to the finish line.
Okay.
And that happens to be where it shows up.
I also kind of look at it as the wall of value. All that stuff on the left is wonderful and fantastic. But if it doesn't get over that wall of value,
Yep.
it all didn't really mean a thing.
And there's no money.
There's no money in it. Right.
You make your money by getting from the left side.
You got to
The
get
right
right to
side.
that wall. Yep. You've got to take those listings of yours and get them closed.
The way I think, yeah, so I'm.
How about jello of a value? Is that better?
No,
Jello of-
that threshold.
quick thing.
I see it like your badass hurdle, like what are you doing to get, I don't know.
Catapult, bridge.
Think about like,
Something
break through the
bridge.
wall.
Just break
Something
through.
bridging
But in
your-
2019,
Yeah.
Megan, that's what it's gonna be. It's gonna be like this. You're gonna have to really do the price reduction, all the stuff that
I
we
get
have
you,
quoted
I
for
get you,
years.
just for my mindset, it just, the visual for me, I always see it as what am I gonna think of that?
Just put like a
I'm
small
focusing on these two and then working with this, and every time I look, I'm like, what are they trying to trigger?
So put white out in there and draw whatever you
Yeah,
want.
okay.
And that stays.
This one.
Whatever works. This one. That's right.
Yeah.
Whatever works for you. Okay, so I've been a big resistor to this. I think it's actually great when I actually look at it and remind myself and then break down my goals according to what needs to happen, not only in my numbers, but what I need to do. And I'm using the 411, which is another Keller Williams tool. I won't introduce that right now, but it's something else that we're using on the ALC in our committees, and now I'm fully adopted.
I was just going to rename that the door of value.
I like
How's
it.
that?
I like it.
Is that better?
Perfect. So based on this,
Window.
what I wanted to roll into, any questions on this diagram or using it? Does anybody think they'll actually use it? It works. It's just a matter of how do you focus on it and how do you actually use it. So this is one of the practices that I have to do weekly for my own coach, right? So in MAPS coaching, this is one of the things that I have to do. It doesn't look like this, but it's a coaching prep form that I have to fill out exactly how many listing appointments when I went on, exactly how many closings I had, listings ticket, the whole bit, right, top to bottom, with additional information. And each year we do some business planning, right? So when we're looking at the models of the economic model, we're also sourcing where my business came from last year, or 2017, versus 2018. And for right now, what's happening is 2018 and 2019. So how many people track where their business came from? To what detail? Pretty detailed? How do you categorize it?
I categorize it as door knocking, open houses, farming, referrals from clients, referrals from.
Here.
Okay.
I did the same
I
job.
think I have a couple more.
Pretty detailed, right? So you know the resource of where it came, and can you allocate how much money or energy you spend on each one of those sources? You can. So you can track it all the way back to expenses and time spent on each one of those categories.
Right, the only one I don't do expenses is the open houses. So low that I don't.
Okay. Well, that barrier to entry is really low. That's why a lot of new agents, that are in the room would do open houses because there's not a whole lot of expense to do them, right? It's pretty simple. So what I've provided to you is the sourcing snapshot. And I don't intend to go walk through this right now. These are the categories that MAPS Coaching recommends that you allocate all of your business from in sourcing. Okay, now, each one of us will be different, right? So, Kevin, can I pick on you?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to sell something here.
For your model, right, and I picked on you last time, for your model, when you're allocating where your business is coming from, break it down for us. What does it look like? Where does most of the business come from?
Okay, so for the last 15 years, pretty consistent, we've run anywhere from a low of about 79 to a high of 85%. That is sphere and referral from the sphere. Okay. So most of our energy goes into that. So you touched on, I'm not a phone caller. That's just not my forte, but we do touch our database 4 times a month.
4 times a month, but the whole
Say that again.
database?
For whole database 4 times a month. 1's mail, 3's email. And
1 mail, 3 emails, 4 times a month, no phone calls.
No calls
not until they call me.
Not until they call you. That's over 200 touches a year, right? My math right?
Yeah.
Over 200 touches a year to your sphere, which results in
Wait. That's
48.
4 times 12.
Thank you.
You're thinking over a decade.
Yeah.
That's a good.
Brian.
That's why I don't do math in public. So 50 times a year, approximately, right? 50 times a year, and your phone rings.
And then we do, like you do, we do client events. We do quarterly wine and cheese events. We do a big annual event, Christmas tree certificates at the end of the year, Thanksgiving time, and then we got one other gift of value that goes out usually around June.
How do you allocate your expenses towards the income?
Those are all fairly fixed. I mean, we know that budget going in, that doesn't change a whole lot, and we run right now at about 24 to 26% is our cost of business.
Is your overhead and expense to yield those sales, 24 or 26%? Okay. And my only question in that was, if we're going to break down where your business comes from, whether it's yours is so much heavy on the sphere that there's not a whole lot of red light, green light other than what you're providing to the sphere, right? So if this event costs you $5,000, then you have to allocate that. What was the yield out of the event or those touches during that time of year? That shows up the next quarter, right? So what are the next stages that come? Who else has a more diverse outlook? Ed, do you want to share where most of your business comes from?
I can't quote my numbers as good. They're definitely sphere. It's interesting. I was getting really discouraged. I do a lot of farming. You guys that don't know me, I do a lot of door knocking, a lot of farming. I do call people a lot, but not cold calls. I only call people that I know. But like 2018 was a horrible year financially out of my farm. Started off really good, and then like the rest of the year kind of died. So I get discouraged, even though I've been doing it a long time. So I went back, and a couple weeks ago, and I did a drill where I went back like 3 years and said, where did these people come from? And here's where it kind of gets a little soupy, because I have a lot of people that I met them at the door. So I never door knocked. They're never in my database in the first place. And I've met them numerous times where I've eventually upgraded them in my sphere, my client appreciation program. And now they're getting the Christmas tree certificate, the apple pie that I do. They're getting all these additional touches, and then some business comes from that. 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, 2 months later, right? So it's really hard when you say we're gonna do something and then a quarter later we're gonna see the result, because I think a lot of the results come 5 years later. You just don't know.
Sure.
So I just know that the more I can get into relationship with people, the more business I'm gonna be able to do with them or their friend. So that's kind of my theory. So at the end of the day, like this year, I'm probably, I haven't run my numbers yet, but I'm probably 60, 70% sphere, very small. It's probably under 20% of my farm. My farm's usually like 40%. But when I did that drill, I went back and I literally started going, okay, this guy came from my sphere, but where did he really come from? He really came from my farm. I mean, I had a thing last year where in 6 straight sales, one was a 23-year-old client, an 18-year-old, the last time I did business with them. And 5 out of 6 of those all came from the farm originally.
Right.
But I wouldn't call them a farm now because they moved out of the farm. And really they're calling me now because for those other 22 and a half years, I brought them a holiday bread. I've sent them this. I've called them on their anniversary. So they've gotten the total sphere, what do you call it? Activity, right? Right, treatment. That's the word. They got the sphere treatment, not the farm treatment. But if I never knocked on their door in the first place, I don't even know them. So you got to be kind of careful when you do it, but it's good to be able to. I think where you're going is great. You got to know what activity got them there.
So, and what I would challenge, and this was a real big problem for me in my sphere of influence versus my allied resources, which you'll see on this page. My allied resources are a large one of David sitting in the room, and what I refer to him, I would consider him an allied resource. I refer to other members, property managers, other things that I refer to and are a business partner with me. Right. If I looked across all of those people, they're allied resources. They get the sphere treatment. They get the sphere VIP treatment, right? But what is the actual result of that? Is it an allied resource or a sphere? When we get into farming, I would argue that the first sale or the first referral that came out of your farm is allocated towards farming.
I agree.
Once that's done, they pop into a different category.
And that's exactly the way I've been doing it. And then I even started slicing it going, because I used to say sphere, and now I just because of KW, I started writing repeat.
Yep.
As opposed, because just like Kevin, a lot of them, a lot of them out of your sphere, it's not them, it's their buddy. That's slightly different than them. What I've learned is we can do all this great stuff. We can do all these great touches, parties, Porsche experience. There's a lot of people out there that are never going to refer you to anyone because they're never going to refer anybody to anything. It's just not in their blood. And I think in today's world, it's getting worse because people are judged so much on, what that they want, put their name behind somebody. So you do have to, like Brad said the other day, you have to cultivate them more to give you that referral. And number two, when they, but they may be all along, they're going to call you. They're just not moving. Like those people, they were 23 years, 18 years, they just weren't moving.
So going back to allocation of all this is when you go through this exercise, and you're looking at 2018 versus a projection for 2019. My point is getting them into these buckets and really identifying where they came from so that you can play a red light, green light game with where your expenses are, and also project for 2019 where you might put more leverage. So 2 years ago, I was doing Yelp advertising. And I thought it was because my profile was so great that I was getting those organic leads in, right? And that the advertising I was spending every month was giving me nothing. Well, I pulled back the expense.
And nothing changed.
Oh, everything changed.
Oh.
I didn't get a single lead from Yelp in 2018.
Oh.
And I realized, wow, dummy me, I should have caught this earlier, and I should have re-upped back into that advertising thing. And I'm not telling everybody to go out and advertise on Yelp, but with my profile and my exposure on Yelp, it was a good return on investment for me. So that was a solid foundation for me to spend money on to generate new leads. One thing I'll tell you about Yelp is if you do have a good profile, my expectation of the leads I would get from Yelp was I was going to be shopped to everybody in the world like Zillow. And in reality, they had already chosen me when they called me, which was a very interesting revelation for me in 2017. So that's a little nugget if you're thinking about it. Yeah.
Especially compared to something like
The
Zillow.
first listing appointment I went on Yelp, I walked in and I had a signed listing agreement within 10 minutes.
Wow. They already made
I
it
saw the opening, I'm like, is there any reason you wouldn't list with me? And he goes, nope.
Okay, then. I like that.
Have it on the market next week.
Efficient.
Skip to the last page.
Yeah, let's get through this real quick.
It's interesting that you said you went on that listing appointment you didn't get in Carmel Valley. There were 5 because in our book here, he says, and your Yelp kind of does it. He said they usually just 1 or 2. 2 is the most.
Engineer probably.
No, actually, it wasn't engineer at all. Very interesting
No,
though.
engineers would be a little more.
Actually, I've been on 2, and one was an engineer and the other one wasn't. And I perceive that we're going to see more competitive atmosphere even in the referral setting, because some people who get referrals from everybody. So don't forget that just because you think somebody's going to call you or refer you to someone doesn't mean they're asking that same thing to 4 other people. In some cases, you'll walk into an appointment and it's like, that person said you're the person, then you're the person, right? And those are the great ones. But I perceive we're going to start seeing a lot more of these more competitive referral atmospheres for multiple different reasons, right? The market's changing. People are a little more unsure as to who to hire because the change in the market. They might start seeing failures of listings not actually selling. There's going to be a change in that dynamic over the next couple of years.
Do you think that's going to put more pressure on commissions?
I think
Change in market?
Well, I think that's one category. I think overall the commission conversation might have a little bit of relief coming down.
Oh, because it's getting tougher for sellers.
Yep.
and they're
People are going to see,
yeah, you're
people are going to recognize value more so than they have in the past. Now, that's not in every scenario. If you have a very competitive atmosphere and, going up on an appointment against 5 other people, yeah, commission's probably going to come up. I've had more and more people sending me, who else is experiencing this, a list of 30 questions.
Wow.
No, they've got it for me when I walk into
Special
the office.
prosecutor.
Recently, I've had so many people like writing, and it's not somebody else's list that they were given. They went out and researched their own lists, and they added all the questions on that they wanted to find out from that agent and what was important to them, and they go through the list. And it's literally like,
And that's before you got the interview, or is that during the
During the
interview that you
interview.
answered? Okay.
Before you start your.
they're like, oh, now that you're done,
Oh.
I'm ready for you. And I'm like, here we go, okay, go. Got that one. And if they write something down that's in my percent, I did this and I may have bit me, but they wrote something down that wasn't the full explanation that I gave them. I'm like, didn't you mean, and I actually had them fill it out further, so that when they went back into their notes that it was a little bit more complete. I'm like, no, if we're gonna fill this out, let's do this the right way.
So
I didn't get the listing, maybe.
So you might fire back some questions at them. So before I can answer these, let me ask you.
What I love about the bold script, and we are using that, is walking into the appointment, setting the expectation that I'm here to interview you too.
Absolutely.
And if it doesn't work,
Absolutely.
it changes that dynamic a little bit. It changes it.
It
And
does.
so it's a good way
Absolutely.
to set the tone
does.
and walk in.
I've seen that.
So any questions about the business goals and allocation of where your business comes from? No? Go home over the next couple of days, you got the weekend before our next session, and go through this. If you haven't done it yourself and know right where it comes from, allocate where your sales came from. If you're brand new, what can you use this for? Well, it's great for tracking for future years, but how do we set goals in these categories? Where do you intend for your business to come from? What style of person are you that you believe your business is going to come from that avenue? You know? I believe that our coaching program here talks about that. Does anybody know anything about the DISC profile? KPAs?
Yeah.
What is that as a reflection of you and when you go out and go do business? Anybody want to guess what I am?
You're a D.
Yeah.
DI.
What's I? I forgot what I is.
I is
Introspective?
influencing and outgoing. Best way to put it. So I'm D and direct and very to the point, and if I'm under stress or excited, my I goes really high. When I'm really calm and comfortable, my I comes down. So I'm actually a pretty introspective person. I don't want to go into a big room of people and start shaking hands with everybody if I don't have to. But if I'm excited or it's a great opportunity or I'm stressed out and I know I have to do it, I'll do
Put
it.
on your game face.
Yep. No one is forcing me to be up here today, so don't worry. This is the excitement part. I actually enjoy it.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when we're looking at this, what do you feel is the best practice? Because some of them do overlap. For example, like geographic farming and direct mail. Could also have some social media piece if we have like a mailer that, because what we're learning to do is like layer them so that you have kind of all of these things hit within, like if you have a geo farm, you might direct them to a farm-based Facebook private page that you're doing. I'm just saying,
So what I would call, let's break that down.
okay,
Geographical farming and direct mail are completely two different things.
right.
Geographical farming includes any direct mail or drop-offs that you give to that farm. A direct mail piece would be me trying to identify every absentee owner in San Diego
Okay.
and sending them a
Right.
specific
I get
piece,
that.
offer, or something like that. If you're farming, it's farming. Whether it's on Facebook, whether if you're farming something that is
So-
specifically for a targeted area, that is
So it wouldn't go
geographical.
under social media, you throw it into farming because
Would.
it's a farm-based, geo-farm-based.
Yep. If you set up a buy, sell,
I
trade
get you.
page in Westwood, and you got the business out of that, I'd probably call it farming.
Okay.
Community events, obviously farming. Now you might reallocate that into events because that's something that's part of your business plan. But break that down based on what the core of that actually is. I told you allied resources and sphere of influence were really hard for me. That was a challenge, and finally my coach said, this is how it works. I also blurred the line when I started doing a whole bunch of business with my allied resources and they were personally buying and selling homes with me. I had to move them to past clients and I didn't feel like that was right. So now all their referrals that they give me, I put in allied resources, and any actual business they do with me is a past client. So it's kind of figuring out what works for you, and it probably won't be perfect, but a great way to go through it. For those of you that are brand new, where are you already seeking these things? Where are you going out and looking for these things? Is it pretty open-ended what you could do to find business? Where you could allocate your time? Maybe it's not an expense category that you're putting in there. Maybe it's a time category that you write into there. You can expense your time. It's a great way to do it. Right? Okay. Let's see if I have any more notes for today. We've got about 15 minutes. In the economic model, is there any confusion on how to get down to the numbers and what we've done so far in the actual model? Is there any confusion on how we got to the numbers or visualization or?
I just want to share a real quick little aha, which is, because I've gone through this work before, but reading the MREA book again, you know, the whole point of this to me, right, is to say, okay, do you have the models and the habits, right? The big thing to me was the habits. You know, what are the habits that you've got to put into your life to make this happen? Because, you know, I've done this a half a dozen times, and you know, I do it, I put it in the notebook, and I don't look at it again. You know, and then you go through it, and you do it again, and it gets really exciting because I put a bigger number than I did the time before. But you know, so this time it's really making us concentrate on, okay, if that's the goal, then what do we have to do? You know, it just connects back to what you talked about last time, which is, you know, what's your 20%? What are the habits that you've got to establish to make sure that gets done?
So one thing you said in that I would challenge you on is you put this back in a notebook.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Yeah, that's
that's
what I said. Yeah,
I do it every year.
that's a bad thing.
And I go back at like
It's not
maybe
hard,
once a
it's
quarter
not
and like, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, right.
But
Yeah.
the focus of this for me
Yeah.
was literally it's taped on a board that I can't avoid it.
Yeah.
So I see it. It goes next to my MVVVP and my 411. It's all on this board in front of me that every time I walk in and out of my office, or even when I'm standing there talking to somebody on the phone, it's right there. just a way to rehash it. And I told you the flip book of having each week and each month and recording those numbers so that, one, I have to report them to my coach, but number two is I can go back and say, well, what's my trend? I can even have it put into a chart so I know what my trend is.
Yeah, and I just don't think you can look at that every day and not be concentrating on, okay, well, how are those numbers? How's that gonna happen? You've got 5 or whatever the number is, you can't just put a number there. I mean, you gotta do things that are gonna get that number, right?
Right.
If you're looking at it every day, that's
And
more likely to happen.
we're gonna translate some of those habits, lead generation model, and all of those things kind of in the next step. So we've kind of, the way I look at this, we've kind of worked our way backwards. So we've worked our big picture. So we know the big why, the big goals, the big models. We've looked at what nets you $1 million. We've even gotten down to what your numbers are for the goal this year. So now what are the habits and things that we have to do on a regular basis to support this model, right? And that's always the big question, right? What are we doing in our own businesses to make sure we hit those numbers and make it consistent?
Get those appointments.
Thank you for sharing that. Paul.
In my classes, every time that I've started to introduce these kind of pieces, everybody heads for the hills. You know, they do. I mean, I bring it up and I say, we got to set our goals. We've got to review them. We've got to do this. Everybody bring them next week and nobody shows up. And we've done this several times. And what Dan just said, which is really critical, is, you know, set your own goals, what we're saying here, but then you gotta have them in front of you. You gotta be reviewing them. Otherwise, they just disappear. And like you said, you know, you look back, oh yeah, last year, oh yeah, that's what ends up happening. It's gotta be in front of you. You've gotta be looking at them, like you said, at least every week, at least, if not every day, which is really what you're doing when you're looking at them every day.
I'm looking at them every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not perfect, and it's one of those things that it's just the visualization of doing it changes the habit, right? We're talking about habits. I mean, having that habit in front of you of basically making yourself accountable to that is one thing. The other thing I encourage you to do is share that with someone else. You know, we talked about that in our weekly office meeting. The accountability, either having a partner or, you know, in my case, having a coach. That here's the numbers. You know what I want to do. Challenge me to get there, right? I'll tell you a quick story. My coach this week is awesome. He's pushing me because he wants a solution. He said, if somebody showed up in your world today and said, I want to make this amount of money, and I'm looking for an opportunity to do so, what would you say to them? And I turned it back around on him. I said, well, that's really interesting. So if somebody showed up on my doorstep and said, I want to make $500,000, and I have to respond to them on how I would get them there. And the funny part was he didn't have an answer. So he pushed me, and I'm like, you know, what are you looking for? What are you probing me for? How are you opening me up here? Because are you saying somebody's going to walk in my life that wants to make that much money, and now I have to support it, and I have to attract them into my world? And I said, what would you say? I turned it right back around on him, and he went, I'm going to have to think about that. And so he was trying to push me as an accountability partner, but at the same time, he was just trying to open me up and didn't really think it through. And I said, look, you got to have an answer for this. We can talk this out next week, but you got to have an answer for this. And what was cool about it was almost codependence is the wrong word, but it was a relationship where I could say, I appreciate you pushing me, but you know, let's talk about this when we're both prepared for it and where we're going. So having that person to bounce it off of, I thought was really good.
Well, I look at this thing, and I think that if you really think about it, it really applies to your entire career. Because I think and I know my wife, I always talk about, you know, retirement and building wealth and doing all that stuff. And really, that's what you got to do. You got to sit down and you got to, okay, what do I think I'm going to need? And again, it's for whatever you personally want, whatever your retirement looks like for you, or whatever the future looks like for you. Maybe it's not retirement. Maybe you got 2 little kids at home and you're going, oh my God, all my friends are telling me it's $50,000 a year to send them to college. How am I going to do that? But you set that up. But if you don't work that, you don't put a plan in place and work the plan, the odds, you might get there, but the odds are really, really against you that 16, 18 years later, or in my case, 30 years later, or 40 years later in my business, then I'm going to be where I want to be are really slim. And that's really what this is. I had this talk with my kids 2 weeks ago. They were 17 and 19 at the time about, put $150 away a month now, and at 8%, you're going to be millionaires. You're guaranteed you're going to have $1 million. You're 65 just by doing that one little. It's the same idea, right? It's the same idea if this was a financial planning seminar, and we were all 25 years old, and you all had a goal of having $5 million when you're 65, whatever. It's same type of stuff. It wouldn't be the activity, because you can't go make your money go do something by wishing it. But if you don't focus on it, if you don't like right now, I'm in a personal thing where I got a bunch of stuff just paid off, and I hate it because my money's doing nothing, and that's not part of my plan. My plan is I got to send them out to work, right? It's the same kind of idea in my mind. It's just a much bigger idea, but I'm saying you've got to do that, and you chunk that down backwards, and that's where you should really be coming over that GCI that you're shooting for. Really, your net you should be shooting for. Part of that net should be savings, future, wealth, whatever, because none of us are going to get a gold watch. None of us, other than Social Security, maybe, none of us have pension plans for the most part, right? Unless you have one from a previous job. So you really want to think of this thing much, much bigger than just this little KW.
It translates into all aspects of business, whether it's the industry or it's something in life like financial planning or savings. Same concept. We're just chunking it down to what to do consistently. I think you're absolutely right.
And you raised a good point when you talked about, you saw the value of Yelp and if you could test those things. But one of the things I find with most of us as realtors, you can be sold anything. You don't want to be left out. Oh my God, they're all doing that. I better do it. And that's really important to look at those things. And what he said about saving, that is so important for the future. Because if you don't plan to not have to work, it's a problem. Overspending. I see that all the time. So I like the idea of focusing on budget. But the new people, they have more time than money, maybe in terms of real estate. You're not making an assumption. So I think that's all very important.
It's a sliding scale, and as you go up that triangle we looked at a couple days ago, that scale changes, right? The scale of your expenses and kind of how you allocate things, your time versus money, it all changes as you keep going. So, very good. Anything else today?
What's our other homework besides doing the sheets?
What's our homework?
You know, can I send it out? I don't have to take it. So what do we finish this? Well, we can finish through what we have here. For next, I really want to get into lead generation models. I think people are going to be very interested in that because it's another segment of numbers as to what converts into this model itself, and also the avenues as to how to go about doing it. In the rest of this, I gave you a 2018 business snapshot of where your business came from. Many of the blanks that are in this, you should be able to fill out just from the exercises we've done so far. 2019 is a projection. So the point of the 2019 is, what were the categories that were highly profitable based on your business model that you can reallocate into for next year? And whether that's playing red light, green light with actual expenses, or it's focusing more time and energy on that sphere of influence or the cold calling or whatever that category is that yielded the most. When I use the Yelp example, I should have caught that in red light, green light so much faster than I did. I closed 5 transactions by spending only a few $1,000s with Yelp. And then I buried my head in the sand and nothing else came. I wasn't watching it. I wasn't tracking it in real time where the business was actually coming from, where the leads were coming from. Now, I've re-upped and gone back into Yelp, but I haven't seen the results yet. So it's not that it's a miracle pill, but I know that my ROI on that was really, really strong in 2017, and it's something that I went back to readdress. You know, in 6 months from now, if it's not working, I'm going to pull it. Right? If I don't see the return in a decent amount of time that I invest in it, I'm going to change that again. So this exercise is pretty interesting if you go through this for 2018 and then project. Based on your goals, let's say you want to do 60 transactions this year, look at the categories in which you did last year or this year, and then allocate for next year where those deals will come from, and then what you're going to do, the actions that you're going to do in 2019 to obtain. So that's been really, really good for me and really shows up in our business.
Everybody familiar with Lab Coat Agents on Facebook? They were talking about Yelp a week or so ago. agents that were doing it had stopped, et cetera, et cetera. And a couple of them reported that once they stopped paying, all of their 5-star reviews disappeared and they started getting negative reviews.
I have the opposite experience. I stopped paying, and my category was really robust, and once I started paying again, I think all the other people that see me, the other agents, are starting to flag on my reviews and get them off. So there's all sorts of things that go on.
Get them off, get your reviews off.
Yeah.
Consumers are getting.
So it's a public forum, and so if I'm paying money, so here's the deal, and we can talk Yelp just for a second. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time, so we have about 3 minutes. So Yelp specifically, the cost per click on Yelp is ridiculously high. It's massive. So if everybody in here went onto my Yelp account right now and clicked on my profile, my spend for the month would probably go away.
So
I would spend like $900 by everybody going in here and clicking on the ad that's on Yelp. Okay, so the challenge is that Yelp is producing something that says, we've already scrubbed the people that are on here. They're here to find the person they want to work with. So my example of in 2017, when we had our Yelp ads out, we were getting people that had already read everybody else's Yelp reviews and went, well, that one resonated with me. I'm going to hire that guy. So their point is, you don't have to go on Google pay-per-click or on Zillow and compete for these things. We've already got the community that trusts our website, and so when they go to you, they're probably going to use you, or it's going to be pretty simple to get into that space. So the challenge with it is, though, the moment I start spending money on Yelp ads, and I go out there, there's other agents, either they're competing against me in those ads, going on there and clicking that, you know, that's not a real review, and that's not a real review. I'm not getting any negative 1-star reviews and someone like outright slandering my profile. But my reviews did drop the moment I went back into advertising. So it went from like 37 down to 25, which is pretty substantial on that website. And the amount of time that I've spent to get reviews on there, it's pretty substantial, and it hurt. I'm like, oh.
Well, no, they contact you, verify that.
No.
So can you
Yeah,
get a
just take them
review
off.
on
And you
Yelp?
can't call them and ask them to change.
I just wanted to say, I don't know if people know, but Yelp it was really started, it's yelling and helping. A lot of, I'm surprised that real estate's in it, but it's yelling and helping. That's how the website was started. So it's really for consumers who want to vent, you know, and talk about what a negative experience
Oh,
it's been.
God, so it's
So
negative.
that's,
All those people went next door.
oh, did I? Okay.
That's a clear negative. God,
That's my own observation. Yes. Oh, thank you so much.
I never,
Um,
I don't.
Asking about expense detail based on where you are at in production is page 157. It's figure 19, page 157. So if you want to go back, this is actually, I normally off the top of my head, it's pretty close. I said 239, 237. It's 157. This is what helped me in growth decide when to allocate money towards support, where to allocate money towards expenses and lead gen. And it has a percentage layout based on where you're at in the actual scale. So this figure, I relate back to it quite often just to kind of check, right, where I'm at, where am I? I'll share with you, we're gonna get into this in the budget model. I made a mistake this year. I went way out of models in the budget model based on this chart and spent a lot of money on salaries and not enough money on lead gen. And it put me in a space that I was very uncomfortable. And I corrected quickly, but it could have been really bad for me. So know that that's a great model to take a look at. It's not going to be 100% accurate for San Diego because like office expense and other things that are in that allocation are much different in Iowa than they are in San Diego. But it's certainly something to look at and be aware of. We'll talk a lot about that next Thursday.
We're meeting Tuesday or not?
Yes,
Yes.
Tuesday here in this room, same time, 1 to 2:30, lead generation model. If it's okay with you on the Facebook page and an email, I'll send you out the actual pages to go and review. Anything that's on the lead generation model, you're safe to read. So if you want to get started, lead gen model, you can start going through that, and we'll get the exact page numbers out to you right after the course here. I wanted to say real quick before we all go, do a one last thank you to Mr. David Aguirre. If you don't have his business card, go get it.
Situation here, I don't know how to handle it.